In our last lesson, we started to take a look at algebra and to review some basics that you need to know to do physics. In this lesson, we'll continue to do that. And we'll put that all together so that you can solve really cool physics problems. Let's learn. Let's start by reviewing our lesson agenda. First, we'll solve an example of an equation within a word problem. So here we'll practice an important problem of using words to identify variables. Then we'll solve an example problem with an exponent on the variable. So how do you handle that when you have an exponent? We'll go through that. Lastly, we'll solve an example problem with the variable inside a square root. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to extract values from a word problem to plug them into an equation, a really important skill in physics, isolate and solve a variable when it has an exponent, and isolate and solve a variable when it's inside a square root. Let's get started with that first practice problem. When shopping for a party, you spend $8 at the store. Not a very expensive party, I guess. You buy 3 pounds of grapes, which are sold for $2 a pound. You also buy a few bags of chips, which are $3 each, and 2 gallons of water, which are $1 each. You present a coupon at checkout for $4, and since you happen to be an employee, you receive a 50% discount. An equation which models this transaction is below. How many bags of chips must you have bought? So here our unknown is that bag of chips. This equation says T equals 2 times G, that's taking into account the cost of the grapes, plus 3 times C, where C is the bag of chips, plus W, which is the gallons of water, minus 4 divided by 2. The minus 4 takes into account your $4 coupon, and the division by 2 gives you that 50% discount. So here's all the variables listed. T is that total cost, G is pounds of grapes, C is bags of chips, and W is gallons of water. So we can now list out the variables that we have in our problem. What's the total cost? It's $8. What are the pounds of grapes? Well, we bought 3 pounds of grapes. How many gallons of water? 2. So we can list the variables as given in the problem as T equals 8, G equals 3, and W equals 2. Then we plug them in. Remember, whenever we solve an equation, we always want to start by plugging things in. So T is equal to 8, G is equal to 3, and W is equal to 2. Once we've plugged them in, we're now ready to simplify. So we plug in, we simplify. So to simplify this, we're going to realize that 2 times 3 gives us 6. And then we're going to add 2, that would be 8, and subtract 4. That would be 4. So we'll simplify this to 8 equals 4 plus 3 times C, that's the bags of chips, divided by 2. Okay, now to get C by itself. Since the whole thing is divided by 2, we want to get rid of that fraction. Do you remember how we do that? We multiply by the number in the denominator, in this case 2. So we multiply both sides by 2, and we'll get 16 equals 4 plus 3C. This is really similar to what we worked in our last lesson. Maybe pause the video and see if you can work out what C is. C turns out to be 4. We went ahead and solved for C by first subtracting 4 from both sides, which would give you 12 equals 3C, and then dividing both sides by 3, giving you C equals 4. Okay, example 2. Here we're given a bunch of variables and an equation, and the new thing here is that we have an exponent. We start out by plugging in our numbers. Remember, we always plug in, simplify, isolate, solve. So we've plugged in. Notice that our 3 went in there for C, and our other 3 went down there for B, and our 1 went in for X. So we've plugged them in. Now let's go ahead and work on isolating. Again, we have our fraction here, so we got to get rid of that 3 on the bottom. We're going to do that by multiplying both sides by 3 and getting 9 equals 1 plus y squared. Let's continue to work with this equation. Now we're at the part where we have to get rid of that exponent, that 2. This can be a little tricky. The opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. So to get rid of that 2, we'll take the square root of both sides. When that happens, the square root and the 2 cancel out, and so we're left with 1 plus y. Something else tricky happens here. We get a plus or minus sign on the left. To explain why, let's go ahead and get rid of that radical, and we'll get plus or minus 3 equals 1 plus y. Why did we get that? Well, when you take the square root of something, you're doing the opposite of squaring it. What is minus 3 squared? Well, it's 9, because when you multiply a negative by a negative, you get back 9. What's plus 3 squared? Also 9. And that's why when we take the square root, we always get that plus or minus thing, which is a little tricky. So this represents two equations. Here's what I want you to do. Get out a sheet of paper. Go ahead. Have you gotten it? If not, pause the video. Okay, now you have your sheet of paper. Write down 3 equals 1 plus y. That's one equation you get. Also write down minus 3 equals 1 plus y. That's the other equation represented there. So this plus or minus 3 equals 1 plus y really represents two separate equations. Now solve those equations. Pause the video and come back. What did you get? You should have gotten y equals 2 or y equals minus 4. Both of those are solutions. So here we get two solutions because it comes out of something with that squared sign. And that's often the case. Whenever we have squared variables, we'll often get two solutions. Okay, now let's do basically the opposite. Let's look at equations with square roots. This you'll see is a little more straightforward. So we're given that f is equal to 2, g is equal to 5, and we want to find h. So remember, the first step is always plug in. So we'll get 2, that's what f was, times 5, that's what g was, equals 1/2 times the square root of h. Well, now that we've plugged in, we can go ahead and simplify. 2 times 5 is 10, and then we get rid of that fraction by multiplying both sides by 2, and we get 20 is equal to the square root of h. Remember, we always get rid of our fractions by multiplying by the denominator. So we get 20 equals the square root of h. How do I go the opposite direction of a square root? Well, I square it. So I'm going to get 20 squared is equal to the square root of h squared. Anytime I have the square root of something squared, it just goes away and I just get h. And then 20 squared is going to give me 400. So we get that 400 is equal to h. Whew, okay. If you've kept up so far, great job. We'll go through math in this class as we come across it as well, so that you'll always be prepared to sort of solve these types of problems. Now it's your turn to practice. Pause the video and find the answer. Were you able to get it? The answer is plus or minus 4. How did we get there? Well, we plugged in 76 for h, 6 for a, 2 for b, and we left c as our unknown. Then in the next line, we simplified to 76 equals 12 plus 4c squared. Then we isolated our c squared by dividing both sides by 4, and we get 16 equals c squared. When we take the square root, remember we get the plus or minus thing. And this should be really clear here, because if I square plus 4, I get 16. And if I square minus 4, I get 16. So we have two possible answers here, again because our unknown is squared in that original equation. Let's move on to practice problem 2. Go ahead, pause the video again, and give it a try. All right, so here we're going to plug in 7 for C, 4 for B, and 1 for A. When we do that, we'll get 4 equals 7 times 1 times 7 over D squared. Awesome. We'll simplify that and get 4 equals 49 divided by D squared. Now, here is a spot where we could have gotten stuck. We have one of those pesky fractions, but we do the same thing we would normally do. We multiply by what's down low. We multiply both sides by D squared. And we get 4 times d squared equals 49. Then to isolate d squared, we're going to divide both sides by 4, and we'll get d squared equals 49 divided by 4. Lastly, we'll take the square root of both sides and get d equals plus or minus 7 over 2. So two possible answers there, positive 7 over 2 or negative 7 over 2, which when we take that to a decimal is 3.5. Okay, last practice problem. Pause the video, try it out. Okay, so here we're going to plug in 3 for x, 4 for a, 18 for y. And we'll get 18 equals 2 times 3 times the square root of 4b. We'll simplify by multiplying 2 by 3 and getting 18 equals 6 times square root of 4b. Then we'll start to isolate b by dividing both sides by 6. And we'll get 3 equals the square root of 4b. Then we'll go ahead and pull that 4 out of the square root, because I can take the square root of 4, it's just 2. So I get 3 equals 2 times the square root of b. To get rid of that 2 next to the b, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. and get 3/2 equals the square root of b. Lastly, to get rid of that square root, I'll square both sides and get 3/2 squared equals b. When I square 3 over 2, I get 9 over 4, or about 2.25. In this video, we've learned the following: how to solve equations with variables as part of a word problem, how to solve equations with variables when they have an exponent. Remember, this is the one where we get 2 answers in some cases. And lastly, how to solve equations with variables that are inside a square root. The key trick here is always to square the thing inside the square root to get rid of it. Hey, hey.